absolutely.
Mm. Well, welcome to the History of LA Ska one-on-one sessions. I'm your host, Junor Francis, alongside our producer and good friend, Eric Kohler. This series celebrates and aims to preserve and promote the ska, rocksteady, and vintage reggae scene in Southern California and beyond through insightful conversation with legends and modern-day talent, including those behind the scenes. And we always have a lot of people working behind the scene. Hence, whether you listen to this podcast series or watch us on YouTube, a big thank you for your support. And please remember to subscribe and tell a friend. As a matter of fact, it's your obligation and your responsibility to tell as many friends.
Yes, thank you, Junior. On this episode, which we're going to have some fun, and Junior and I have really been looking forward to this. We welcome back one friend, bassist Marc Wasserman, and we welcome back a new friend recently met on a trip to New York, thanks to Marc, and been familiar with his work for some time now, but singer, multi-instrumentalist Roger Apollon. Marc and Roger have been brethren and partners in music for 35 plus years, starting with Bigger Thomas, then on to Road Boy George, and now with their latest project, the Phensic. And Marc is also author of Ska Boom, an American ska and reggae oral history. So rest assured, his knowledge and passion run deep. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us tonight.
Great being here, man. Thanks so much. It's amazing.
So I want to ask for clarity. Is it Phensic? What's the part? Is that pill that you take, Phensic?
Exactly.
Is this
exactly?
Okay. All right.
Exactly.
All right. Yes.
You're the first person who got the reference out the gate. Most people are like, what is that? Phensic? Phensic?
Yeah. All right.
You were asking about the pronunciation too, right?
Well, I wasn't sure if it's the same. Phensic.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a Phensic. Yeah. Yeah. So
how do you pronounce it California style?
Well, it's really Marc's idea.
So you have the East Coast pronunciation and the West Coast.
Oh, I would say Phensic. But
Phensic, yeah. Phensic. I would say the Phensic. Yeah.
Oh, Z in Jamaica. Phensic.
It's Z, yeah. But to be fair, Marc and I are always no disrespect to artists who have Jamaican accents, who are not from Jamaica, who do it well. But Marc and I have always been like, we're not from Jamaica. We're from New Jersey. So we say the Phensic. I don't think I would feel weird saying the Phensic, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm like, it's like the way you say ska, like that's the way you say it, right? But I'm from New Jersey, so I'm gonna say it's I'm gonna stay true to me. So that's how you pronounce it. But it was really This was Marc's idea, so I'll let him elaborate.
Yeah, so Junior, you can back me up on this, but Phensic was a headache pill in the UK in the 50s and 60s, and obviously because Jamaica was a colony of the UK, Phensic was available in Jamaica. Yes. But in Jamaica, it became a reference that I heard in songs. Tapazuki has a song, She Want a Phensic. Yellow Man mentions Phensic. So I was like, what the hell is a Phensic? What are all these guys talking about? So like in typical amazing Jamaican style, you take something that's in everyday life and you figure out a way to make it a song. I don't know, but and then, I was reading a James Bond book one day, and Phensic is mentioned in James Bond books because he used to, drink a lot, and he would wake up with a hangover and say to Miss Moneypenny, get me 2 Phensic, please. So I put it all together. But for when I told Roger, I said, this is a Jamaican reference, and we're a band that plays Jamaican influenced music.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody will know this one. Why not? Why don't we go with something like this? And we had never been in a band with "the" in the front. So,
it's true. Yeah, we want to be a "the" band, and and also once we adopted the name, for me, we always think deeper about it, and for me, it literally is a cure for the headache, right? So, we feel that a lot of the music that we hear out there is gives you a headache, and a lot of the ska and the reggae and whatever that's out there, and music in general gives you a headache, and we like to think that our music is a cure for that, and we're literally without taking it deeper too, it's like the band The Cure, right? So they were a new wave band that took music in a new direction. So we're kind of taking inspiration for that. For reggae and ska, we're going to be the cure for that. Which is it's a bold statement, it's a bit of a boast, but So I think sometimes you just have to put it out there and see what happens. And so far, that's working for us.
Let the chips fall where they may.
That's true. Absolutely. We're going to talk a lot more about that project too a little later on.
So this is for both of you. So maybe start with Marc. So Marc, we may have discussed this in the previous conversation, but your first Jamaican baptism, what music or song?
Yeah, my Jamaican
baptism, I love that.
My Jamaican baptism was that I won a Third World album at a birthday party. Wow. It was like a grab bag kind of thing. I don't know what I did, but I put my hand in this bag and I felt this. So I thought, what is this? I pulled it out. Third World album. So I had to be maybe in 6th or 7th grade, and I took it home and I started to play it. And I had never heard reggae music before, other than like on AM pop radio. Remember, I'm old enough to say that I remember when Paul Simon had Mother and Child reunion. But other than that, I wasn't exposed to reggae music. So this was my first introduction to reggae was Third World. And it opened up my ears in a way. And I remember listening to that album a lot and thinking, this sounds very different than the pop music that I hear on the radio. But then you fast forward to the specials. And so, I'm 14 years old and we're going to talk about this a little later, but I see the specials on Saturday Night Live. And a friend of mine lends me that album. And that's the beginning point for me and that's, the rest of my life. So from 14 years old until now, I'm in my 50s. It's all been ska and reggae music.
So, Marc, have you thought about if other grab bags had other CDs in it? and if so, you realize how much that could have changed the course of your
That's a great thing. Yeah, if I lived in an alternate universe and I pulled out, an Ozzy Osbourne album, who knows, right?
Or Bon Jovi,
Right. Bon Jovi or
his jersey.
Some easy listening, something. Roger, how about you?
Yeah, similar. Reggae music was always the background. I heard, Bob Marley had "Could You Be Loved" on the radio. That was a big hit on the radio. Stevie Wonder had Master Blaster. So I always I heard it before, I didn't hear it, but I didn't hone into it until college. When I got to college at Rutgers, that's where I met Marc. I heard about Bob Marley, but somebody's like, "Oh, you don't know Bob Marley, you got to get the first album." So I think the first album was Burnin', Bob Marley and the Raiders. That's the first album I got. And Midnight Ravers is the first tune on that song, on that album. And it's such a atmospheric intro. And that whole album is just raw. I don't know if you're familiar, but it's just bass, drums, keys, vocals, soul. And you could feel it. So I remember buying Burnin' and playing that record to death. And I started to understand that Bob Marley wasn't just music, it was a message. That's what connected with me. And then fast forward for me with ska, right around that same time, actually right around the same time, I go back home for college, and I'm at my local record Corvettes, like department store, and I see the $5 bin, and I'm flipping through the $5 bin, and I see the first special album, and I pick it up because I see black and white people in the band first. So I was like, okay, that wasn't very popular in the 80s. 2, they're all wearing suits and they look cool as shit. And I'm like, and I see the songs on the back, and I'm like, all right. And then I see Elvis Costello, his name's on it. So you know what? $5. And I bought it. And I didn't like it the first time I listened to it, the first few songs. It was a slow build because I was like, what is this? This is like messed up reggae. It's all fast and whatever. But then again, I started to really connect to the punk and to the message of it. And then I was all in. And then, I was at Rutgers. I bought the clothes. I was a rude boy. I bought the blackjack, the creepers, at a flat top. I was, all of that. But that was my immersion. It was really, I was lucky enough to go to college and really have time to dedicate to spending 2 hours in my room to listen to this music, a night.
Yeah. So your home is New York City?
New Jersey for both of us officially. We both lived in New York for a while. I lived in New York for about 12 years. Met my wife there, had my kid there. And, and I put up a New Yorker cartoon. I'm from New Jersey, but I identify as New York. So that's kind of like
Well, it's a hop and a skip across the tunnel, or
Yeah, I work 2 nights a week in Harlem, so I'm a New Yorker. So, but I was born in Newark, raised in West Orange, and went to school in New Brunswick at Rutgers. That's where I met Mark.
Right. So Roger, continuing kind of along those lines, who are some of your musical inspirations? I've heard you talk about, this might have been when we met up in person, or maybe in your interview with Mark, when you had your incredible, my favorite podcast of all time. Later, I heard you talk about Rank and Roger and Angela, but talk about some of your musical inspirations and what they meant to you.
Yeah, my very first, the very first person that I wanted to be like, it was Sting. Sting was the first person I wanted to be him. The music, he played the bass. You know, I'm a closet bass fan. That's why Mark and I are such good friends, because bass players. But when I heard the music and the songs, and the songs are in my range, and I would mimic his voice. And I just loved everything about the Police. I was infatuated with. I bought all the albums. I bought the T-shirt, and I bought everything. And so Sting. A couple of things about the Police. It was everything he sang. He multi-tracked. He had harmonies on almost everything he did. Sting. And so for me, everything I do the same thing. I have my lead part, and I have my two harmony parts on top. Sting also wrote a lot of his own music. And so Mark and I are big proponents of this, although Rude Boy George was a break from that, which was a well-needed break, and we loved it. But Mark and I met on live music, on original music, and they wrote everything. And I remember seeing the album, saying all the noises on the album by the Police. And just knowing that every sound that you heard on that album was by those three guys. And so we tried to do the same thing with the Phensic. So Sting was number one as far as like song arrangement, composition. And then number two, David Hines of Steel Pulse, another voice that I mimicked, because I have a similar quality to David Hines' voice, I think. And I try to copy that. A lot of it did. And so Steel Pulse, the first Steel Pulse album I went crazy for, man. I was in Florida on spring break, hanging out with some friends. Somebody rolled out the biggest bag of like skunky weed, rolling up this weed, and he puts on True Democracy.
Wow.
And man,
yeah,
man, dun, 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 it goes right into Chant the Psalm, and it's just from there. And then we flip it over. It's just that album itself. So those are my two jumping off points.
Yep.
It's like songwriting and soulful, rootsy, melodic reggae, UK. That was UK, Jamaican UK reggae.
Right.
And for me, that's got a certain grit to it, because UK was not a fun place to live as a Black person in the 80s, right? 70s and 80s. So now it's great, well, to some extent, I'm sure it's whatever, but you hear the struggle, you hear the music. So those two albums, those two touch points, those two guys, and then the lots of underneath, but those are my guys.
And Junior and I have talked about this. Steel Pulse, and Mark, you've written about this or talked about this on your in the past too. But Steel Pulse and their influence, right, and in the U.S., right, on American reggae artists and even beyond, it's just so substantial, right? I mean, I was so influenced by them and just such a huge fan back in the day. And they got, when they would get some radio play and just, touring, huge.
Yeah, huge. And, interestingly enough, when they started out, and they were very big in America, and especially New York, record company really discouraged them, but they decided to take the chance and come to New York, and they were roadblock. Every time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Radio station, two radio stations, came out to meet them. They had fans in New York, hardcore fans.
Right. Yeah.
They were supported by the left, strongly by the left.
Yeah. The music spoke for itself. It just,
there you go, man. All the progressive.
Yeah. And the lyrics at the stage show, I seen pictures of them at the time with the Klan hoods doing Ku Klux Klan. But could you imagine going to a show, expecting to see a black reggae band? Somebody comes out with a Klan hood.
Right. Yeah.
That's high theater, man. Very dramatic. So
I was going to say, I wasn't aware of Steel Pulse until I saw Erg on Music War, which is this music documentary that's just like, it's probably got about 15 or 20 bands playing live. And I had the same experience. I'm sitting in a movie theater, and suddenly you see somebody in a Klan hood come out, and I remember all of us were like, because you just didn't see that.
Sure, yeah.
You see somebody in a Klan hood, and it's a black person in a Klan hood. It was like,
it's crazy.
Oh, what's going on here? So I immediately went up to the record store and bought a Steel Pulse record the day after I saw Erg. So to your point, Junior, they turned on a lot of suburban white kids who were into punk rock because they played with punk bands and they were open to expanding people's minds about. To me, they were always a punk band that played reggae. That's
right.
Good. That is a
great way to describe it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Roger, did your Haitian heritage play a role in your musical journey?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be in ska if it wasn't for Haitian, if it was for my Haitian background, really. I mean, what I loved about my family, my parents loved music. Both my parents. My dad was an architectural engineer. He passed away a few years back. My mom was a retired OR nurse, So they met in Brooklyn, and when we were at the house, I remember the record player on a Saturday was merengue, it was salsa, it was James Brown, it was Temptations, it was Stevie Wonder, it was Tom Jones, it was Bill Cosby comedy albums, it was whatever, but it was always on. And so for me, it sparked a curiosity in music. So everything, there's a station on the East Coast called WABC that was very popular, AM station as a kid, and they played everything. And that was, that for me, that was, people talk about the American songbook, I think that for me was the American songbook, from Barry Manilow to Chicago to Barry White. You heard everything. And I feel like that gave me a real broad musical education. So I say all that to say, when reggae popped up to me, and ska, two things: the rhythm, was the main thing, and then the message. This is my message. These are basically my people, right? West Indians generally are clumped together as en masse, although we have different segments. But as a Haitian, or as a Haitian man, a Jamaican man, Bahamian man, a Trinidadian man, they can all relate to these messages that you're hearing. So for me, it was modern protest music, and that's how, and writing music, it just always came out as reggae or ska, because my heroes were Sting and Steel Pulse. And then my third hero in college was Angelo from Fishbone, because I didn't think entertainment for me was a possibility. I sang in the shower. And that's how I got connected to the band. I sang in the shower for all these years. I sang in the shower for like 21 years or something like that, or 20 years. And when I started singing in the band, I felt like everything, the harmonies, everything came naturally to me because I was practicing the harmonies to all the songs I was listening to on the radio. So I'd hear a Barry Manilow song and I'd sing the root, and then I'd sing, and when it come on again, I try to sing the high harmony throughout the whole song, just because you're a kid and I didn't have Nintendo and I didn't have the internet yet. So just
Wow.
So all that kind of led me, like I felt like it pulled me, and Mark probably has the same thing. Like I don't feel like I chose ska and reggae. I really feel like ska and reggae chose me. I feel like the opportunities just leapt up more in that thing. If a rock thing, if I was pulled into a rock thing or a disco thing, but I was always pulled into this vortex of the music, no matter what I tried to do. So I just felt like, look, I met my best friend for
So perfect segue in talking about meant to be. So Mark, will you talk about you two, your meeting, and then what led to the formation of Bigger Thomas?
Sure. So like Roger, I had a similar experience. My parents played music all the time. But for me, it was more the radio. My father, I remember my 7th or 8th birthday, got me a little, remember those little AM radios?
Yeah.
In New York City, you would see people walking down the street with it.
Oh yeah, with the little earplug
right next to their ear. So I listened to radio all the time, particularly when I was supposed to be asleep. Parents would put me to bed, and I would turn that radio on and listen to WABC. And like Roger, I never would have envisioned not being in a ska and reggae band from about being 14 years on. 14 years old and on, I wanted to be in a band. I just didn't know how to do it. And so I had to buy the bass guitar, and I stared at that bass guitar for a long time because I thought it was my friend at first, but I realized it wasn't. And I would hold it, and I would sort of fantasize about how to play it, but I had no idea what to do with it. And so it took me a long time to work up the courage to actually figure out what was going on with that. And that took some time. But when I got to college, I was in a couple of really bad punk rock bands. But that was a learning experience, how to be in a band, how to sort of write a song. I mean, we weren't really writing songs, we were making noise. But somebody showed me where C was and where D was. And so I knew basic notes, but not a lot. But I worked up the nerve at one point. I was like, you know what? I want to start my own ska band. And so in those pre-internet days, I made a flyer, and I put these flyers up all over Rutgers University campus. I literally spent like 2 hours one day just putting them up everywhere. And I had them on these bright colored blue and pink because I figured it would stand out. And Roger was the second person to call. And we joke about this all the time. You know, on the phone, he sounded white. And I think he thought I was black. So we make a date to meet, and he rings my doorbell, and I'm going expecting to open the door and find somebody that looks like me. And I think he's expecting to open the door and find someone that looks like him. And we're both like, oh, okay. On the phone, you sounded much taller. You know? So that was really our first meeting. But to be honest, I wanted to be in the two-tone band more than anything in the world. To me, being in a band that had that was multiracial was more important than knowing how to play the music. To be honest with you, at that point.
Yep.
And it was the selector and the specials and the English beat and bad manners. I wanted to be those bands. So when I saw Roger, I felt like I hit the jackpot because I was like, great, we're off to a start. We got one white guy and one black guy. So we got to build on this because this is the base. From a political statement, this is what I want, and he did as well. And that was really sort of the beginning. I think we worked out how the music was going to sound, but in the beginning, it was about the philosophy of two-tone and unity and fighting racism. That was what it was all about.
And what year? What year are we talking?
1988, which was a very, 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 very crazy year in New York. There was a lot of horrible racial stuff going on in New York at that time. That we felt we had to sort of combat, or at least make a statement that not separating black and white people, but bringing black and white people together was an important statement at that time. This is pre-Rudy Giuliani, which was one of the worst times in New York City's history for race relations. And so what we were trying to do was not come out and say this is a political statement, but just by getting on stage together, it was a statement.
Right. And by choosing the band name Bigger Thomas, I mean, that's a statement as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, we were called Panic. That was our first name because I was a big Smiths fan and they had a song called Panic. But there was a band from Virginia Beach, a cover band called Panic. And, you know, we didn't get duped, but, you know, they had somebody say, hey, we want to get you some shows down in Virginia. Send us all your information. You know, back then there was no internet. So we sent them all our information. A month later, we get a cease and desist, you know, hey, blah, blah, blah. So we needed to change the name. We ran through a few names. And then Mark was, I think Mark was reading Bigger Thomas at the time. It's like, well, we call it Bigger Thomas.
Yeah.
A native son, I'm sorry, at the time.
Native son by, I was taking
Richard Wright.
Yeah, I was taking African-American studies.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So and first we're like, you know, and for me, you know, and I love that book, and Richard Wright's one of my favorite authors. But I just felt like, you know, again, this was 88, you know, it's a pretty aggressive racial name to call your band, you know, in 88. And will people get the reference? And so we just agreed, let's use it for a couple of shows, and then we'll pick another name because we had a show coming up like next week, and the club was like, "What's the name so we can promote the show?" But the name stuck because people were like, "Oh wow, great name!" And we did again. We leaned into the significance of it too. Just and my take on the book is just how there are people, Black men are just, on the edges of society trying to survive, and how they get sucked into things, and sometimes manipulated and used by other people, for their own goals. And, that's a whole nother story. But at least the scene at the time we felt looked a lot more like us. There were more Black and white bands in New York City.
Yeah. And who were the other original members of Bigger Thomas?
So we had Steve Parker was the guitarist. So Steve Parker, well, you tell this story because you formed it and I came in later.
Yeah. Steve Parker was a guy I met in one of these bad punk rock bands I was in, and he loved ska music as well. And he was a tremendous songwriter. So as I was trying to learn how
amazing guitarist,
I was writing lyrics. I've always been a writer, and I would give him lyrics, and he would literally come back to me 2 days later with a fully realized song with my lyrics. And I was like, I got to stick with this guy. He knows what he's doing. And so he and I were sort of the core. And then the rest of the band was actually all either from that ad I put up or people that we sort of met along the way. We were quite a motley crew, for sure.
Yeah.
And the first person to show up generally was the person that got the job.
Yeah.
So he did the trumpet, boom, you're in. So,
nice. So Kevin Shields is on trumpet, and then I showed up, and then I had a friend of mine, this guy named Miggy, another Black guy that he was like my rude boy father. Like he godfathered me into the whole rude boy thing. He was a Black rude boy from DC, Kenny Gale, but everybody, he said somebody gave him the nickname Miggy. I still don't believe it, but whatever. But unfortunately, he passed away. But he was the guy when I was at Rutgers getting into ska that we met, and he connected me to the U.S. ska scene. I didn't know there was ska happening in the States. For me, it was just the English Beat, the Specials, and the Selector, and they were in Europe, and they weren't playing in the States, and they weren't even together at the time. This is '88. So he connected me to the Toasters and all that stuff, and he told me where to get the shoes, and we were like, man, we were like best friends. So when he was in the band, he and I up front, and then Mark's roommate, Jim Cooper, who laughed at first. He was like, you guys suck, whatever. But then we couldn't find a drummer. He's like, all right, I'll drum with you guys just to, until you find a drummer. And then he's a really good songwriter too. And then he got into it. And that was kind of the band. And then we had a trumpet player named Sean Moore, who I think the story is, I think he just rolled up to a show and walked up on the stage one night with his horn. Halfway through the set, started playing, and then he was like, "Yeah," and then he'd be like, "All right, you're in the band." So it was 7 of us, and we rehearsed, I think, almost every day.
Wow! Had to be tight.
Was that?
The band had to be tight.
Yeah, it had to be tight, and we were excited. I mean, Mark and I wanted to be the U.S. I mean, I wanted to be the U.S. representative of Two Tone. That's what I thought we were doing. I thought we were starting our own Two Tone cell in New Jersey. You know what I'm saying? And we're about to launch this racial unity offensive with this music. And we started writing all the songs. We wrote all these songs. And then, the show, I don't know where the interview is going to go, but the first show we played was just, it was amazing. It was 400 people. We opened up for, not because of us, we opened up for a bigger ska band from New York called the Citizens. They were playing out in New Jersey. And it was just 400 people. And after that show, it was just like Cat Club. It was just, in my mind, we were going to be, U2, or at least, Milli Vanilli. I would have taken that at the time. I would have taken that career.
Right. Except really singing.
Yeah. Except we would have written our own music though. But,
right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, you go.
So the sound that Bigger Thomas was about obviously was definitely ska, but also integrated reggae, calypso, soul. was that all by design, or was that something that kind of evolved into that kind of melting pot, so to speak, of music? Because it stood apart from a lot of the other New York area bands. So for that matter, any of the other U.S. ska bands at that time.
I'm glad you're right. Right. Not just New York, the entire, California.
Yeah. I think to answer your question, it was a little bit by accident, but also this guy, Steve Parker, who I mentioned earlier, he got easily bored. So he never wanted to write the same song twice. So a lot of that came from Roger because of his musical background with more traditional West Indian music. But Steve also liked Mento. Like, I'd never heard of Mento before I met Steve, and we played a Mento song. And he loved calypso music, and Roger loved calypso music, and so we played those kinds of songs. And you're right, I think a lot of the more traditional New York scene and then American scene, I wouldn't say they looked down their nose at that, but we definitely did not fit in with like the quote unquote, trad scene, because we experimented with other forms of West Indian music. But the fact is, the proof for me was when we played a big show, the dance floor was full and people were dancing to those songs.
We go. That's what matters.
Right.
Those are songs that are easy for people to dance to, and they don't have to be 100-mile-per-hour, ska punk song, but more like you could bring your partner out on the dance floor and you could actually dance with that person while we were playing. And that always struck me. And Roger was working hard up front. But I could see from the back, I would look out at the audience and people were bobbing and weaving. To me, that was always a good sign.
And did your diverse sound also lend the band being able to support and tour and play with reggae bands?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the beauty to our sound was we supported a variety of acts. We opened up for Yellow Man, but we also opened up for The Alarm. We opened up for Burning Spear. We also opened up for De La Soul. So we are
nice.
And I think our focus, this is where Steve and I think all of us were, but I was really locked in with Steve, is that, it was always, for me, getting into the music was never about copying somebody else. I never wanted to copy. I wanted to be inspired by something else, but I wanted to do something purely original. But so for me, going outside of the genre, like, for me, it's kind of like essential if you're going to take the music to the next direction, wherever it's going to be. So I think between Steve's willingness to create, and I think all of us, and Mark probably agree, we just were open-minded. I mean, we all like different kinds of music. So if another style snuck in, we weren't like, oh, this doesn't sound like ska, we have to keep it out. We're like, oh, wow, let's see if we can make this work. And I find that it's, you roll the dice, but why do the music if you're not going to take a chance, right? And no disrespect about people who play it safe and want to do something that people hear. That's fine, but that's not what we want to do.
Well, you were doing what you loved, right? And we're good at playing too.
Yeah, and we just like to see that. There's just more opportunities to explore the music than I think people realize, and people forget Bob Marley. The Scotalites, they weren't trying to copy anyone. They were trying to create new music. Lee Scratch Perry, like a lot of the stuff that people, now you hear it, people imitate that, which is fine. But I don't think Lee Perry wanted to, I don't think even till he went to the ground, he was doing new music. And I think that's the point. You should always be evolving and moving your music forward, no matter the cost of, what it means to fans or whatever. Hopefully your fans will go with you, but, you should be true to the music and true to yourself. And for me, again, there's the specials from the first album to the second album, Selector, first album to the second album, English Beat, first album to the second album. You're talking radical jumps in sounds.
Yeah.
So we took our cues. So we took our cues from that. Like, that's where we take our cues. For you to put out, the specials first album and then more specials that has songs like Stereotype on it. For you to put out Selector that had On My Radio, then to pull out Celebrate the Bullet, which is like almost psychedelic, to go from I Just Can't Stop It to Whoppin', and you got songs, I think French Toast is on that album, I think, right? Or something like that. Like, that's like a calypso, like, come on, man.
Yeah.
And these are the masters doing that. So I'm like, well, shoot.
No, those are great examples. Yeah.
But it seems to me, though, that it takes a special kind of intelligence, determination, and commitment to write songs that address political and social issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to be intentional.
More ingredients, but I think those three: intelligent.
Again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, I agree. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are just, this is a vehicle. We are lucky enough to be blessed to be able to play this music and have people listen to it. So I feel like it's our obligation to do our part of the bargain, which is, this is protest music by definition. Mm-hmm. I'm a Black man. Marc is a Jewish man growing up in America. We both grew up in the suburbs, where Marc grew up, Jews weren't, super popular. Where I grew up, Black people weren't super popular. We both dealt with our deal, and we are both coming from two different backgrounds, but we share the same experience, mm-hmm. which is fuck racism. And we don't have to do it this way, and we can work together and make good music.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
I would just agree with that. I was raised by two-tone, and so, whether I was brainwashed by it or completely, by it, Roger and I called the Church of Two-Tone. We worship at the Church of Two-Tone. And,
Amen. Amen.
Completely, those men raised me. The men on all those albums raised me. They gave me a worldview. I love my parents. They raised me properly, but it was Linval and Ranking Roger and Dave Wakeling and Pauline Black who gave me a political consciousness. God bless them all. And that's why I am who I am today. And Roger as well. We did have a Jewish man. He's a Black man. I dealt with severe anti-Semitism where I grew up. He dealt with racism on every day where he was. So we had that in common, that common bond, which was like, fuck this. Let's try and follow in the footsteps of our heroes and do something original if we can.
Right.
We have to also give, I guess, respect and honor to the Bob Marley, the Peter Tosh, the uncompromising, the fearless, those elders who decided that this is the direction.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Absolutely.
Right. Whatever.
Absolutely.
This is the direction.
Very much.
Taking a stand against injustice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, please.
No, I was just going to say, that resonates with. Again, Marc and I were the reason why we're still friends for this long. It's not just the music. It's more than that. It's a lifestyle. If two-tone is the way you live, you should your life should reflect your musical taste, I think. And so you should be hanging around people who look different from you, and you should have them in your lives, and you should have them in your lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. Marc, touch on what the New York area ska scene was like in the late 80s, early 90s. if you can summarize for a couple of minutes.
This I gotta hear this.
I will say that it was mind expanding for me to go to my first New York City ska show at CBGB's. They used to have Sunday matinees at CBGB's. So first of all, to go to CBGB's was an education because punk rock started at CBGB's. So to be there was crazy. If for anybody who wasn't ever there, it was a shithole, but it was it was life changing to go there. But it smelled like piss, and the staff who worked there were rude. But you would see bands there that would change your life. And so the New York City ska scene actually developed because of high school kids like Roger and I who saw the specials on Saturday Night Live and loved Peter Tosh and Bob Marley and the English Beat. They were the ones who originally started bands like we did, but they were a couple years ahead of us, probably 4 or 5 years ahead of us. So by like 1984 and 85, you have high school students in New York starting bands. Second Step, I wrote about them in my book, Beat Brigade. These are bands that are forefathers of the scene. And you also have the Toasters. And, basically Rob Hingley comes along and organizes this scene. It was there. he just was able to organize it and put it together. He's a smart guy, and he's like, we have more of a chance of being successful if we band together. He deserves credit for creating a scene in New York.
Indeed.
But in the early days, it was very, very diverse. There were bands like us who played calypso and mento songs. They were bands that had more Black members than white members. So when I would go see these shows, that was as influential to me as seeing the English Beat and the Selector and so on. I think what happened was, as that scene grew and got stronger, it also got a little narrow-minded, and it became more sometimes about how you looked and did you play ska the right way. And, we were seen as upstarts, and sometimes we were not given the time of day by some of our brethren in the scene. We're all good now, but I think originally they saw us as I would say New York to New Jersey is sort of like LA to Orange County, right? Sort of look down on us.
It's true.
And, but I think we won them over, and we got to play with all those bands at some point in time, and we're friends with all those people now. But they hazed us a little bit. They didn't make it easy, and that's fine. That made us work harder, and it made us want to be better. And I'm glad that they sort of made it difficult for us a little bit in the beginning.
Nice.
So we're talking about now New York in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So Roger, while you're talking, what are some of the career highlights for Bigger Thomas?
Probably the first one was when we won. There was a Battle of the Bands competition where we won 20 hours in the studio to record our first album.
Ooh,
that was that was.
Tell us more.
So we I think we were around for about a year at the time. This was 89. And there was a club in Neptune, New Jersey. It doesn't exist anymore, called the Green Parrot. And they had this Battle of Bands, and there was I guess they convinced one of the local recording studios that, if the winner would get, 20 hours free in the studio. We were like, wow. So, and it was like a 3 or 4 or 5 month thing, because it was like every Saturday there was 3 bands, and then long story short, we were one of the few bands. So you know how it is. Back then they'd have 3 bands play, but sometimes one of the bands wouldn't show up, or sometimes 2 of the bands wouldn't show up. So somebody would just win on default. But we were one of the bands. We were one of the few bands. I think we were the only band where every night we played, the other 2 bands showed up.
Consistency.
So we had to really play our asses off. Long story short, we went through, and the night of the final, the club at the time was the fullest we've ever seen it, and the audience was like rabid. Like when we played the first song, they just I felt the heat of the audience jump. Like, it made me nervous. They were like, I was like, oh shit, these guys are ready. So we played the set of our life. I mean, when I tell you, it was a blur. And when we found that we won by like a point or a half a point or something like that, I mean, I felt like we were like, I was like, we're going to win the Grammys now. Like it's good.
Excellent.
So we won. So that was like career highlight number 1. And then the second one for me was playing the Special Beat came around like in early 90, I think, at the Ritz. That was like a 5,000 person show. And we did our set, and then I snuck onto the stage. Bucket's gonna hate this, but they invited the Toasters onto the stage, to do a song, because the Toasters were on the bill too. So I saw Rob go up. I'm like, where's he going? Oh, he's gonna go up on the stage for a song. And then I don't know who told me. He's like, you should go up there with him. I was like, nobody invited me. So anyway, he goes up. I follow him up there, and he kind of gave me this look like, but I got to dance on stage with Rankin Roger and Neville Staple and Ray Bradbury, and I got to see all the guys on there. So those are my 2.
No, Mark, what do you want to add to the Bigger Thomas career highlights?
Both of those were highlights for me. I think in addition to that show Roger just mentioned, we were interviewed by the BBC.
Yeah.
Story on and you can find this on YouTube. It's crazy. Yeah. Roger and I we literally look like babies.
We look like we're 12.
We do look like he looks like he's 12. He looks exactly the same. You can tell.
No, I had the flat top. I don't have the flat top anymore. I've got the no top.
We had no idea that we were going to be interviewed, and we showed up, and I remember all of us wanted to be interviewed by the BBC, but they would only take two of us. And
showed up where?
We flipped a coin.
Were you in England?
This was so BBC brought a crew over to New York at the Ritz.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they were really taken with the fact that Americans had finally fell in love with two-tone music, and they wanted to interview an American band. So they interviewed Roger, Ranking Roger, and Neville about how did the special beat form, and then they interviewed Rob Hingley about the Toasters, and then they wanted to interview two people from Bader Thomas, and we all had to flip coins because we were like battling it out. Like, I want to be on. No, I want to. And luckily Roger and I won.
I didn't know we flipped the coin. I thought it was always going to be me, man. Damn. Wow.
Maybe you're right. It was between me. It was between all the rest of us and you.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, damn.
But that being interviewed by BBC was mind blowing.
Yeah,
really great questions. And then when you see the final thing, they literally use like 20 seconds of us. But they must have interviewed us for like an hour.
Yeah. It was an hour-long interview. It was like 60 minutes.
No seconds, right?
After that, I was like, we're definitely going to be famous after this. And then we saw the film. It was like 20 seconds. Yeah, it's online. Yeah.
I mean, not the 20 minutes, the entire interview?
The entire interview was on there, but they only included 20 seconds, like maybe 5 seconds. So yeah, it's on there online. You can see us on there.
The crazy thing was when we played with Special Beat again about a year later at this club in Trenton called City Gardens, and we walk in and there's Horace Panter, right, a guy I worship, bass player, and he goes, "I saw you on the BBC," and I was like, "Oh, yeah." So that was definitely
that's super cool. Yeah.
Yes.
And I will go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
Now, so I will add Horace Panther figures in a lot to the history of the band, because when we were looking for band members, we went to a Ranking Roger show at City Gardens, and we walk in, and not only do I see Ranking Roger playing the pinball machine, which is amazing, and then we go to the back, and Horace Panther is sitting down there, and he talks to both of us about, I'm like, "Oh, we're starting this band." He's like, "Oh yeah," he encouraged us to start a band. And this was back when we first started in '88. So the fact that he did that, and then we saw him again, he said, "I saw you on the BBC," is a testament that like he was paying attention.
Yeah, Marc, I want to switch direction for a second. So since your book Ska Boom was published, what surprised you the most in terms of artist response?
Anyone say, "Mark, I didn't say that"?
No, I think the most interesting response was the response I got mostly was nobody really knew a lot about that period of time in American ska and reggae history. It really, until I wrote that book, I think it was just something that it had been lost to time. Everybody thought
people knew about their own band, right, in their own little scene, but not the greater American. Wow, fascinating.
Yeah, there was some of that. Bim Scala Bim knew about the Toasters, and the Toasters are really responsible in a lot of ways for spreading the gospel.
Sure.
They came out to California. They saw the Donkey Show. They saw Let's Go Bowling. They put those bands' records out. So Rob Hingley deserves, again, a lot of the credit for proselytizing and supporting and building up the scene that we know. But I think a lot of people that I interviewed were grateful to be interviewed, because they were like, "Thank you. We really felt what we were doing at the time was important, but it was before the internet, and there's really no record of all the hard work that we put in to this. We put our sweat and our love and passion into this. So thank you for taking the time to let us tell our story." So that was really the biggest, honestly, the biggest response I got from people that I spoke with.
Right.
They were grateful. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I mean, there's not been such a comprehensive type of book or documentary or anything for that matter that's really documented, the scene during that crucial period.
So the question is, I'm going to ask all three of you, why is that so?
I mean, yeah, I think it's a lot. I mean, Mark found that's a lot of work, but I also think it's, and I had a discussion the other day, and when we were interviewing and doing another interview, it's just, and I don't know if this is going to happen or if it's something in the works or nobody's thinking about it, but I hate to say it, but if ska is not a category at the Grammys, it's for some reason, if you don't have a if you don't have a category, Americans like categories. If you don't have a rap category, if you don't have a hip hop or a dance or a Latin music, if you don't have a category, it doesn't have legitimacy. And I feel like people view ska, for whatever the reason, they view it as illegitimate music. Like, it's always, every year for the past 30 years, it's on the rise, right? How many years is ska going to be? 40 years. It's up and coming. Ska bands who get famous feel like they have to leave ska behind in order to get legitimacy, commercial legitimacy. And I don't think that's true. I think that's a self-imposed narrative.
And that narrative is so catastrophically sad.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's an authentic music style. Mm-hmm. We should have a ska category. We should have a best ska album. Oh, how do you know what ska is? How do you know what hip hop is? How do you know what reggae is? When I hear the hip hop category, I hear stuff from all kinds of, like, that's not the point. The point is, I think that's why there's not any real, until Mark's book and in defense of ska as well, but not real scholarship on it. And I think, and I always say this to Mark, and he doesn't think so, but I think what he's done is really, people don't understand it now, but in years' time, it will resonate. This is the document. Yeah. This is it. This is the definitive. There's not going to be another book about this subject. Yeah. No one's gonna be like, you know what? Mark didn't do a good job on it. I'm gonna do this book about the same exact period of time. That's just not going to happen.
Until Mark does part 2.
well, Mark they'll have to do a part 2, but that's part 1 of it. But I think for me, it needs legitimacy beyond just the musicians. It needs commercial legitimacy. Just like Afrobeats was around for decades.
Right? But now it's
decades. Nobody would. Fela's been around for. And nobody now, every fella this, fella that, now all of a sudden, right, because now it's a category. Now, best Afro will be, these guys. So, and this is what, and honestly, this is what drives me. Like, I'm like, the title's still up for grab. Like, nobody's really, it's still open. Like, nobody's claimed. There's always going to be that band or that act that defines the genre, that lets open the other floodgates of these other bands. And there have been swipes at it, but I don't know. I feel like there's still an opportunity for somebody to say, this band, it will be ska band, and now ska will be a thing like Afrobeats. But yeah.
I'll say, because I was a would-be historian, I'll say, Junior, that before the internet, it was not easy to document so much of this. That's the first thing. And also, I think, most people would think that American ska started in the 90s. It was signed by, major labels, signed bands. So a lot of people think, well, that's when it started, right? And also, that's when I feel it was somewhat perverted, because it became more of a less attention paid to the Jamaican roots of the music. And I think we've talked many times, Eric and I have talked about the beauty of ska is it's mutable. It can be mixed with all sorts of different genres of music, to its detriment, I would believe, at times. And so it changed and morphed, and that's not a bad thing. But for me personally, I always feel like if you don't pay respects to the roots, then you're missing the point. And so for me, that's why the book was important, because everyone I interviewed talked about Jamaican music and seeing The Harder They Come, or buying that record, or seeing the specials on Saturday Night Live, or buying that record. These are bands that paid respects to the fathers. And right. So that's where I think that's what I and Roger and I have talked about this often. That's what's missing for us, is just respect for the roots, respect for the soul, respect for the political ideology, God bless everybody who plays ska music. Don't get me wrong. But I'm saying personally, as I get older and older, and I get to be an older man, I feel like I can speak my mind. That's what's missing to me.
Same here.
And that '90s phase is a beautiful thing, but it's devoid of all those things that I just mentioned. It became pop music, and there's nothing wrong with that, of course. But you can't say that's American ska music. That's not. It's part of the continuum, but that's not when it started. And that's why the book was important for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations and thank you, Marc, for that book. And Junior and I reminisce often about this event here and how much fun we had, meeting you and working with Howard Parr and putting that show together at the Grand Museum and meeting the Box Boys and having them reunite after 40 years and the Untouchables and everything about that amazing afternoon. So
well, yeah, it was super exciting to see. Supernova was just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
there were the Untouchables, and I thought how amazing that from that event you two put together so beautifully in LA a couple of years ago. There were the Untouchables now getting the recognition that they deserve as
absolutely
one of the forefathers of American ska. Heartwarming to see.
Yes.
Jerry up there and Chuck up there getting the recognition they deserve.
Absolutely.
And speaking of event, we're having an event again at the Grammy Museum. I'm so correct.
Oh, yes. But yes. Another panel.
That's right. There you go.
But November 7th, we're having another panel. It's of Titanic proportion.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking forward to having
you have a better memory. Won't you wrap up a couple of the guys?
It'll be hosted by Junor Francis.
That's what I was asking. I mean, but mention,
we have Karina from Dancehall Crashers.
Right. Just go for
wow. Okay.
Nina from the Cover Ups and Ska Fitness. We have Oliver from Ocean 11, Ben Harper, Greg Narvis, drummer for Hepcat.
Oh wow. Okay.
From the Skeletons, we have Paul Hampton.
Yes, man. See the man.
We have Skeletons. Wow.
We have Matt Parker from Donkey Show, who we just interviewed with some of the alumni a few weeks ago, and then we have Scott from Real Big Fish. So it's a nice array of of talent from the late '80s or I guess mid '80s to the mid '90s. So
just had to plug that.
Thank you, Junior.
No, as you should, definitely.
Just had to plug that.
I just wish we lived closer.
Well, it will be recorded, and we'll keep you all posted on when you.
Oh, cool! Thank you.
So let's move on to talk about Rude Boy George and how that came about. I personally love a number of the songs that you did and recorded, but I have to give honorable mention to your versions of Lies, Don't Change, Middle of the Road, and Young Turks. Those are my personal.
Nice. Wow! Thank you. But
talk about how that came about and maybe some of the highlights for that project.
Yeah, do you want to start, Marc?
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up loving ska and reggae and '80s new wave. Parallel. They both spoke to me in different ways.
Sorry to be so rude, so I can follow the conversation. What is '80s new wave?
'80s new wave was post-punk. So, the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Damned sort of started punk, but this was the wave of music where record companies got involved and fashion became just as important as the sound. So the Human League, Culture
Duran
Duran. Yeah. So, and all the bands.
Spandau Ballet, all that stuff. Yeah.
A lot of my big favorites from the '80s too.
Yeah.
So, what I've always loved about reggae music is versions. And the Jamaicans would hear a song by the Beatles and boom, there would be a reggae or rocksteady version of a Beatles song or a Rolling Stones song or so on and so forth. And that is always something that I found I really loved. And Roger and I and a friend we had, Steve Schaefer, used to talk about, we should start a band that does what Jamaican bands did. We'll do ska and reggae versions of new wave music, right? Let's follow in the footsteps of all these other Jamaican artists who've done this. That was sort of the original idea. And we needed a proof of concept, so we got a couple of musicians together it was really just for fun. honestly.
Yeah.
And literally we found out somebody was having a birthday party and they wanted us to play their birthday party. So we learned 10 songs, seriously, just for this birthday party. And
that's right. That's how it really started.
It was again, like the show that Roger talked about, Bigger Thomas, where the audience reaction was similar. People were like, "This is amazing. You need to keep doing this."
And what year? What year are we talking now?
This was 2013.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was literally just it was gonna be, all the musicians were in original music projects. So we're like, we'll just do this one-off. And maybe this will bring some attention to our original music projects. And this will be good for everybody. And it literally became its own thing. So we did a second show and
grew legs, grew wings, and took off.
Yeah. And at first I was really I don't know about you, Mark, but I was resistant because I was like, I don't really want to be in a cover band. But I was really enjoying it for a couple of reasons. The main reason was that for some reason doing cover songs gives you the freedom to really just have fun and not worry about if the song is good or not.
Yeah.
Because the song is good. Because you're doing it and you didn't write it. And two, we were working for the first time with women. We had women in our band for the first time. Bigger Thomas was an all male thing. So we had Meg Howe on vocals and Jackie Chasen, who was playing sax, and Pam Buckley on keyboards. And women bring a very cool vibe to women musicians bring a very cool vibe and a different perspective to the music. So the whole thing was just fun. And I think that's what resonated with people. People always kept on saying, like, people always say, you guys look like you're having fun, because we really were having fun. And then the songs that we were doing, we didn't want to be corny. We didn't want to do a corny rip-off cover. We wanted to actually reimagine the song in another way. So that's why every song that we took on was like a new project. How do we make it sound good, but not recognizable, but unrecognizable at the same time, I think. So
and there's, I mean, just in Southern California here alone, there's a lot of 80s cover bands, but Rude Boy George is so unique in that you weren't just a cover band, like you said, you reimagined, but also you were doing it in certain reggae ska type styles, right? Two-tone type styles. Did you discover that there were others that were like that, or not? Because I don't know.
Yeah. Funnily enough, when we first started, there was a band in LA called Ska Mode.
Oh, and, yeah, okay, yes.
So we actually had sort of a silly war of words for like a hot minute or so.
Yeah, it was nothing serious.
We were doing this first. And we were like, no, we were doing it first. They mostly did Depeche Mode songs, right. But we were like, we took the whole canon of new wave music.
Right.
I think that was probably the difference. I watched a couple videos of Ska Mode. They were very entertaining, but there was like a sense of whimsy to what they were doing. Like they're almost like winking, like this is goofy, and we know it's goofy.
Right.
I think on our hand, we were actually taking it fairly seriously. Like we were really applying musicianship to each song, and for every song that worked, there was one that didn't. So we spent a lot of time in the rehearsal studio. We would try something and we'd be like, nah, it's not working. Yep. And then the ones that did worked immediately. So that was sort of how we figured out what we could move forward with and what we couldn't.
Yeah, and our real inspiration was Easy Star All Stars. That's the better example, right? Yeah. Like Dub Side of the Moon, Radio Dread, the stuff that kind of stuff. Because they took the songs like Dub Side of the Moon for me I still play that record, and they took real musicianship and reimagined these Pink Floyd songs. Like honestly, I got more into Pink Floyd and Radiohead from listening to the Easy Star songs. Yeah. They brought me back to the originals. So we were trying to do the same thing. We wanted people to be like, wow, that's such a great, I wonder what the original was of that. Or, I didn't even know that was, a song. Our favorite thing was to take a song and make it sound like ours, but have it be a cover. And so that was like getting an obscure enough song to be like, wow, that was really good. Who was that? Oh, that was Cyndi Lauper. What? So, but yeah, a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. A lot of fun. And we learned a lot too. So
yes, we did, man.
Kudos to you guys for that.
This is for both of you. Now on to Phensic.
What? Oh yeah.
Different pronunciations now. So somewhat like a bigger Thomas in terms of diverse sound with more of an old school reggae feel, right? Is that a fair description?
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
What are some of the listeners' response and listeners and viewers' response to Phensic?
The album just came out like 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. But I'll say this: the response has been good, but the biggest response, and Junior, I know you can speak to this, the biggest response has come from Mexico and South America. We have, for some reason, this project and these songs and this band is resonating with Spanish-speaking parts of the world. Not so much in the U.S., but Mexico. Like, we can't wait to go to Mexico because they basically were like, "We love you." They loved us from the first song we put out. So yeah. I think that's what's been the biggest eye opener for me. Is I think the center of reggae and ska music is moved, and it's now Mexico.
Yeah, and I also think
I have a philosophy: go where you're wanted.
Yeah, exactly, right. Go where the yeses are, right? And also, I've noticed, and Mark will probably say the same thing, is we've had fans and friends for of all persuasions who know we're involved in the bands and different bands, and I'll say that my friends who normally don't listen to ska music have really been like, wow, I really like, they haven't really commented on the other stuff before, but they've really commented on the Phensic stuff. So I think there's something about the stuff that we're doing that's resonating with people outside the scene too.
Yeah.
Which is nice, because I feel like we're always trying to look for new audiences, within and without.
Is anyone working on a Mexico tour or one show, one-off show at the moment?
Not yet.
We'd love to hire you, Junior, to do that for us.
We'd love, yeah. We're ready
to manage us in Mexico. We're ready to sign.
Wow. We're ready. Yeah, we're ready to go for real. We've talked about
again, go where you want to.
Yeah.
So it's really impressive, because Mark, I remember when you told me when this was getting off the ground and being formed, but it's so impressive to see. It seemed like you guys, and I mean this as a compliment, put this together, wrote and recorded fairly quickly. The other thing that was really impressive is the amount of really cool and captivating content that will help the listeners, right, be introduced and know each of you guys individually and then collectively. So just everything about, I think, the rollout plan of how the Phensic came together, I think is so impressive. One question: would the Phensic exist if there was no Bigger Thomas?
No, and that's
probably not. Yeah,
I like to say the Phensic is the evolution of Bigger Thomas. We just took a little detour in with Rude Boy George, but that detour now I realized was important, because it gave us, I think it gave both of us, a tremendous work ethic with this new project. Like, we came ready to work, and we spent a tremendous amount of time in the early part of this year in a rehearsal space, just the four of us, Greg Behan and Robert Julian and the two of us, working on music. And we hadn't done that in a really long time. And Roger had a lot of really good, he had been writing songs for a long time, and he brought in the first two songs, which were proof of concept, worked and clicked immediately. So I knew right then and there we were on to something here.
And
what were the first couple songs that were written?
Roger, Number One Again was one of
Number One Again, and Don't Test Me.
Oh, okay.
Don't Test Me was the second one.
I had. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go.
I was gonna say, when I heard Number One Again, I was like, it was the same feeling I had when we first played Ska in My Pocket for Bigger Thomas.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was just like a whoa, this is like the best of Motown and rocksteady and R&B all mixed up, and Roger's got like a great lyric, and it's simple, catchy, memorable. That's all you can ask for, honestly.
Yeah. And full disclosure, everybody in the band writes stuff. So I think Rob Julian had the hook, had the music, And I heard the music, I was like, whatever. And then once I heard the hook, and I brought that in, and then Don't Test Me was something that like I wanted a stripped down. I was watching a lot of police documentaries over the past few months, and they always talked about how the stuff on the radio was very like cluttered, and how they wanted to strip down the sound, like Walking on the Moon.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Ching. They wanted, because there was nothing like that on the radio, because everything was like whatever. So Don't Test Me was an attempt to strip it down, just to kind of bass drums.
It's so funny because for me, Don't Test Me is a respects to Toots and the Maytals. That sound. A very, very American soul meets reggae sound, stripped, soulful. So I was listening to a lot to Toots and the Maytals when we originally started the Phensic, and when I heard that song, I was like, this is perfect, right up the alley.
Yeah, but the whole concept, and again, this is not rocket science. You guys know better than me. Black American music has always informed reggae music from the very beginning.
Sure.
Right? Bob Marley and the Wailers, they were trying to, Otis Redding, whatever was happening, whatever they can catch on their radio from the States, whatever soul they can get, they're trying to emulate that, and they're bringing that into the music, which is why the music sounds the way it does. Mm-hmm. When hip hop got really big, right, and dance hall, it changed up dance hall, right? When hip hop got big, the reggae changed again, right? Afro beats is getting big, it's changing again. So for me, ska is. For me, I feel like the way ska is going, why is ska not a reflection of Black American music now? Mm-hmm. Right? That's what I feel is happening. And for us, it's like, why can't we, as the Phensic, get inspiration for the current? So I think ska is influenced by Black American music, but it's influenced by Black American music from the 50s and the 60s.
Right.
What if ska was influenced by the Black American music of today? Mm-hmm. What would that sound like?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do with the Phensic, is we're trying to take the current R&B, Thundercat, whatever's happening out there, Robert Glasper, whatever cool thing, we want to add that in. And again, back to my Grammy thing, is like my whole challenge to myself is, if the ska had its own Grammy category, what would a Grammy-winning ska album sound like?
So how do we take it to that level where it gets recognized? Who do we talk to? Who are the authorities?
Before we can talk to anyone, what Mark, me, and the other guys are doing is we have to do it. We have to put out the music. Like, we have to show people will understand what it is. I can talk to you about it all we want, but I have to show it to you. You have to hear it. And I think what we're trying to do is to create it, and then it's going to be like, oh, okay. Then you can, in my opinion, every music that's broken it's been an act or a song or something that's broken, some act or something that just, it built up to the point where, Rapper's Delight, right? Hip hop has been around for a while, but it's something about Rapper's Delight just poked through, then everybody else came through. Right. So if we could figure out for the Phensic, our project, and what I feel is we want to try to write that album that's going to be that thing that poked through. And I think it's just going to come down to us just putting our heart and souls into the project. That's it.
Yeah.
And you can't, and that's something you can't, you just have to do the work.
So a question for the both of you. What are your thoughts about the American ska scene today, Mark and Roger?
And Roger,
you go first, Mark.
And I know that the three of us talked about this some in New York not too long ago.
Look, I think if you looked at Supernova from a couple of weeks ago, it was a perfect representation of where the American ska scene is right now. I think the people who promoted that show did a great job of bringing in international bands and American bands, and the New Tone bands of Bad Time Records had their own slots. I think they did a fantastic job of showing the world where the music is right now. And to me, it reflected the diversity of it. But diversity, I mean, sound-wise. Were there a lot of bands influenced by Two Tone? Were there a lot of black and white people up on stage? No, there were not. But that's where ska music is right now. It's kind of bigger than the roots in some ways, and I think that's good. And as I've said before, I'm old fashioned, and so to me that's a miss. So I think what we're trying to do, again, like we did in Bigger Thomas, is also to make a political statement in the membership of our band, which now has expanded to 6 people, men and women, 3 people of color, and 3 Caucasians. To me, that's as important as the sound, again, because I watched Supernova and I was very impressed by everybody, and particularly the bands from Latin America. Out of Control Army blew me away, and there was a band from El Salvador at Hasibo, I think, who were also quite good. And Tokyo Ska Paradise Orchestra and Fishbone. So I don't want to. There were
Holly Cook as well. Holly Cook was
there, and Sister Carol was there. So I think they did a great job of mixing the genres. But the American band still, to me, it's the influence of punk has really taken over ska. A lot of ska music, and
true. Yeah.
And as I say, there's a flavor of ska for everybody. So what you like might not be what I like, but the fact is, there's this whole world of ska music out there, and that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I feel like American ska today is missing an opportunity. I think I work in the craft beer space, and I feel like it's very much in the same place where, the current market, it's predominantly white suburban kids, which is fine. Like, again, it's not even about color, but this market, it's very finite. Why would you want to limit your influence to just one demographic? Why wouldn't you want to include other demographics? And again, I think Supernova did a great job including the Mexican bands. And I think here's what Supernova did a great job is they did a good job, presenting different genres, different types of genres from all around the world. And I think that's a good start. Yeah. But and they are not the saviors of ska, and I'm not here to rip on them, whatever. It's a great thing. But again, the diversity, the music is not speaking to the black and brown people that are out there for whatever the reason, who are into this music for whatever the reason. In America, I'm not saying it, Mexico, whatever. So for me, I think the issue is the source of who's creating the music, right? And it's great that people are making music, whatever, and I'm hesitating because I don't want to. I'm not trying to divide or create divisions, but my experience is when I go to a lot of ska shows, the New York City ska shows, those matinees of the 80s, I felt like I was part of my people because I was part of my tribe because I saw literally every race, Asian, skinheads, like I saw everything. I don't see that anymore. And I think the music is reflective of that. So, and that's a challenge. That's something that is going to be, that's an internal thing. That's something that the bands that are out there that are doing have to recognize and realize and have to be intentional about wanting to change if they take that seriously. I'm also realizing that ska is also inclusive of other ideologies in America, right? Yeah. Like I used to, I think it was a fair assumption to say anybody involved in ska in the 80s was about racial unity and two-tone, pretty much exclusively. Now, there were other political views involved in ska, which is, again, fine. I think it's an evolution, but that changes the message. That changes the demographics. So I think, like craft beer, there's going to be a shakeout. Like there's a lot of beer on the shelf. And at some point, the guys and the girls that aren't doing so great will fall off and the real ones will stay. I think ska is going to go through the same kind of shakeout. I think diversity is the direction. I think Mexico and places like that, I think they are the future, and maybe they will regenerate an interest in ska. You know how it is. Sometimes it has to be famous someplace else for it to come back. So maybe when they see like 10,000 people at a ska show in Mexico, maybe Americans will get excited and say, hey, I want to see that band. I don't know, but ska's in a very weird place, and I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can be a part of it being a bit more. But right now, it's a bit homogenous. And
interestingly, the place of its birth has been dead in Jamaica since the 60s. Totally dead.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
So true, right?
So you don't hear ska music when you go to Jamaica, do you?
No,
and it's your grandmother's or grandfather's music, right?
Right. Right.
That is interesting. What I will say though that I'm excited about is, you know, the diversity now extends beyond race, and so now you have an openness to LGBTQ and transgender, and that to me is the ethos of two-tone as well. Two-tone wasn't just about black and white; it was about men and women, but now it's also more inclusive. So for me, that's a great that speaks to the strength of the music. The people playing it might not look like us, but the fact is they also have felt marginalized or overlooked, and they are now taking up that mantle as well. And so there are bands that are doing that I'm very impressed with, you know, that have extended that the loving hug of two-tone beyond.
Yeah.
Those are all great points and super important. So looking ahead, the Phensic.
No.
So we're gonna get you to Mexico City. You're gonna write a Grammy award-winning album. But what else is on the horizon for the band?
Well, we've always wanted to come to California. You know, Bigger Thomas never got to California. We did once. We played in Los Angeles once at a Knitting Factory show, and that was great.
With Chris Murray.
We played with Chris Murray, and I forget, it was the old Knitting Factory.
Yeah, the Toasters and
right.
People.
Yeah. Right. One of those tours. Yeah.
So I think our goal, we always talk about, can we get to California? Can we play San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange County, and then can we go to Mexico? So I think that's really our goal. You know, there's a little bit of a scene here on the East Coast. It's a little stronger than it was in the last couple of years, but to me, California and now Mexico have really always been the center of it. So that I think from a playing live perspective, that's the goal.
And what time frame? What time?
Next year, next spring, as soon as possible. I mean, we go this winter. I mean, whenever. And I want to add to that Europe, because I think our sound. There are a lot of I think there are a lot of reggae lovers in Europe who would really get our sound. England, especially Spain. So I honestly believe, like, you know, I believe the Phensic is one of those things that will take off outside of the States and we will come back. You know, and I think people catch on there. But yeah, for me, West Coast and Mexico for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah, for real. Let's talk for real, because we feel like we're ready for that. And we want to go where the yeses are.
Speaking of upcoming shows, Bigger Thomas celebrating an anniversary, and I think you all have at least one big show coming up. Will you touch on that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So it is 35 years, believe it or not.
Amazing.
So we are playing one show.
Crazy, actually.
The Wonder Bar in Asbury Park. We played a lot in Asbury Park back in the day. It was really good to us. So it's kind of exciting to go back and play at the Jersey Shore.
Yes.
One more time.
Yeah. October 14th.
It's nice to play these songs again. So I'm excited about that. We haven't played as Bigger Thomas in probably 5 or 6 years.
Nice.
Shake the dust off a little bit.
Yeah, it will be rusty.
It's kind of cool. We actually have a show on the 14th as Bigger Thomas, and then we're actually playing our debut as the Phensic the next day.
Oh, so amazing! And where's the debut?
Roger and I live in Essex County, New Jersey, and Maplewood is a big town here in Essex County, and they've invited us to play an art and music festival. So we're playing that the next day. So we're gonna try and get a couple hours of sleep after the Bigger Thomas celebration, and then get up and play our debut as the Phensic. So I think that's a
good video too of that debut.
Oh yeah.
That'll be great. We want to move on to a question, Marc, as hopefully a lot of the viewers and listeners know. Your wealth of knowledge is vast, and so we want to have some fun here and also just kind of rattle your brain. And in full disclosure, you're prepared for this question. Nonetheless, it'll be a great one. So, in in your opinion, and we'll make this a collective discussion, but in your opinion, Marc, what are a handful of the most important or the biggest moments in America as it relates to ska? The biggest ska moments in TV. TV.
So, we talked about this from a television perspective.
Yes.
Which now even sounds so old-fashioned, since everyone's doesn't, my 16-year-old doesn't even watch TV. But,
I know, right?
There was this thing called
stream everything.
So I think I honed in on three, Eric. And I think they, again, from a historical continuum, they all tell part of the story of American ska. So the first one, and I mentioned this a couple of times tonight, is the specials on Saturday Night Live in 1980. Game changing, absolutely game changing. First of all, you didn't see black and white musicians playing together on the bands that performed on Saturday Night Live. They were either white or they were black. You didn't see the mixed, and you certainly didn't see British bands that often on Saturday Night Live. And Neville Staple, they hone in on him, and he's holding a machine gun, right? And they kick into Bernie Rhodes' "Guns Don't Argue," and boom, all of them are like going in different directions. And I remember watching that and just being absolutely stunned and amazed. And I've never seen anything like it. And that's all
YouTube it now.
And that's all anybody could talk about at school that following Monday. Did you see the special?
But there was nothing like it before either.
Yeah, I think they walked through the crowd to get up on stage too. I think they walked through the audience to climb up on the stage.
Yeah.
And the energy of that set is just so like.
And I had the honor of interviewing Horace Panter for my podcast, and I asked him, "How did you get all that energy?" And he laughed and said, "Well, some of it was chemical." That certainly contributed to a lot of that kind of unhinged stage performance. But nevertheless, we didn't know that as kids, and we just thought like these guys are shot out of a cannon, and this is unbelievable. So I think that inspired people like Roger and I, that first wave, we're Gen Xers, to start the first group of American ska bands that I write about in my book. I think from there was, we're all, again, old enough to have watched a lot of cable television. The USA Network was actually a happening thing back in the early 90s. And they used to have this thing called USA Up All Night with Ron DeShear and Gilbert Gottfried, God bless his soul.
Yes.
And some of the producers must have really been into ska, because they did a New Year's Eve ska thing where they showed Porky's, but in between Porky's, they would cut to the Scofflaws and the Toasters.
Wow,
and
really?
This was in 1992. So December 31st, 1992, going to New Year's 1993. And
Porky's.
That performance 100% had an effect on lighting a fuse to reignite the ska scene, the 90s ska scene in America. Lots of people saw that. Lots of people got into the Toasters and the Scofflaws. Moon Records suddenly were selling lots and lots of records. So that fuels the early part of what I like to call the Ska Boom.
Yeah, of the 90s,
and as a result of that, you have Special Beat form. We played that show with them, but they form and come and tour here. And that Special Beat tour with the Selector and the Scotalites and the Toasters, again, blows the doors off.
Indeed.
And really spreads ska music, and you suddenly have ska bands everywhere.
Yes, and that was the Ska Movie tour, right?
Yes, the Ska Movie tour of 1993. So Ranking Roger and Neville deserve a lot of credit for a second time. And I think the third one was MTV finally jumped on the bandwagon in 1997. August of 97, on a very sleepy Sunday, they decided to do something called Scotterday. And it was Carson Daly, and he looked slightly ridiculous. He didn't quite get the rude boy look. He had a fedora on instead of like a tie. And he was wearing Converse, instead of proper shoes. But they showed a whole bunch of ska videos, and then they were at this sort of like beach house, and all these punk rock kids with color.
With some different kind of chaos happening.
Yes. And I think that was notable because it sort of finally was mainstream acceptance, and it was also the death knell at the same time. because all the bands that had been signed weren't selling records anymore. And I think that sort of was the downfall of 90s ska. So you had from 1980 to like 1980 to 97, so 17 years of ska brewing and, you know, becoming popular, going underground again, becoming popular. And then it was kind of dead for a couple of years until I would say like LA scene kind of kicked back in. That's when I think, Eric, when you and Junior probably were there and were responsible for a lot of what was starting to happen in like 2005, 2006, 2007, around them, when ska, in my opinion, started to come back up from the underground. So
that's around the time, around 032, when Chris Murray and his Blue Beat Lounge started happening here. I do want to add one thing with that Scatterday MTV thing. I did like how they would show the madness and some of the two-tone videos, right? But then they'd also show some of the more 90s type ska acts. So I did
Mighty Boss Stones. Yeah.
Right. Yes, correct. Boss Stones are right. Yeah. But yeah, that is fascinating. Yeah.
Interesting.
Pretty well. I am gonna have to try to find the Toaster Scofflaws. I was familiar with that, but I don't think I've ever seen that footage. So I'll have to go online to see if I can.
Yeah, I haven't seen that either. Yeah,
I can find that. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that.
So where are we now?
Well, I was going to ask. We talked off air about this, Roger, and it's really important. Can you can you tell us what you're drinking and a little bit about
what I drank actually?
What you drank?
Yeah, I got into craft beer about 10 years ago. Like I said, I was showing you guys behind me the table. I started a beer tasting group out of my living room. I called it the Brew Council.
Wow.
And once a month, we would, we educated people. I had a couple of friends who were beer experts, and we would do tastings. I did this for about 5 years. I made up polos. I went to a festival. People mistaked us for a real organization and started thinking we were a real brewery. So year 6 or 7 of doing this, people are going up to me saying, "Oh, you brew beer?" And I'm just like, "I don't brew beer. It's just a club." And I got to a point where somebody asked me, "Do you brew beer?" And I said, "You know what? We brew beer." So me and a couple of neighbors opened a brewery called Four City Brewing, not too far from Lathrop in Orange, New Jersey. Marc had his book release at the brewery, and my brew boy George played there a lot. It was really a lot of fun. Me and my business partners, whatever business, you get in the business with people and you don't know what you're getting into. So I'm still owner of the brewery of Forest City, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day. And I was like, you know what, I need to do my own thing. So I started a brewery called Copper Son, SON Brewing, which is a reference to a poet, Harlem Renaissance poet, County Cullen, wrote a book of poetry called Copper Son, SUN, that inspired it. But Copper Son, SON, the imagery of just being a son of copper, and the logo is just my profile. And I've been selling, so I brew in New Jersey and I sell beer in New York City. But I got about 25 locations in New York right now. And I'm looking to be the first Black-owned brewery to open a brick and mortar in Harlem. That's what I'm putting out there too. It's because everybody's told me, like, you can't open in Harlem, it's too expensive. And I'm like, really? And
got
me really mad.
There you go.
So that's what I'm trying to do. Whether it happens or not, it's another thing, but I'm putting it out there. But in the meantime, beer, I'll send you guys a link. You can buy it online, get sent to your house in 44 states, probably within the week. So so the beer and the music I call it Bruzik. They go together.
Goes hand in hand.
Well, you're being innovative and creative. So.
Yeah, you have to.
Where can people find it online?
Oh, Copper Son, COPPERSON Brewing. It's on Instagram at Copper Son Brewing, and Facebook at Copper Son Brewing. For now, working on the website. Website should be up in about a couple of weeks.
No, that's exciting, Roger.
I'm gonna put Eric in the spot. We're gonna start ours out here.
Yeah, seriously. I'm serious about the collab.
There's no time for joking.
Yeah,
seriously,
come up with a creative collab for sure.
Yeah, but my homework to you guys is start talking to a couple of local breweries in the area and just float the idea of, hey, we're thinking about doing this event or whatever. All right. We have this brewer flying in from the East Coast. We'd love to do a collab. And I don't have to be there for the brew, but it'd be great to get out there and collab and whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And if they're open to it, it's not really that hard. It's really a beer that they sell, and It's all the proceeds go for them, and it's a free promo for them as well. So
nice.
yeah, we can talk more.
I love that. I love that. And Marc, share where your book is available.
Sure. You can get my book, Ska Boom, either on Amazon, or you can order it directly from my publisher, which is DeWolf, DIWULF.com.
And then I also encourage people to, I know that you're not doing any new episodes, but if people have not listened to your podcast, again, I can't say enough amazing things about it. I really loved it, Marc. Where can people find that?
You can find that on any podcast platform, Apple or Spotify. It was a Ska Boom podcast. And thank you very much. Yeah, I really love doing it for the time.
But is it the lack of time why you're not? I interrupted you.
You know, I actually got COVID.
Availability?
Yeah, I got COVID. I got pretty sick with COVID, and it took me a little while to recover. And when I recovered, I just didn't have the energy. You guys know, because you still do it. It requires a lot of work.
Yeah.
To do a podcast week in and week out, and I did it. It was a perfect thing to do to help promote my book and to really, satisfy my urge to talk about history. I think it's so important for people to know where the music comes from, and that's always been my mantra. So
availability.
Sorry.
Where is it available?
Oh, you can listen on Apple Music. You can listen on Spotify, any podcast platform. Just type in Ska Boom.
Indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we're nearing the destination, huh?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen,
so any part in any thoughts? What else you guys would want to include before we?
Yeah, anything we didn't touch on? We really appreciate you guys taking the time, and we're also very excited for everything that lies ahead with the Phensic. So
anything we didn't cover that you want to share with us?
Oh, this was incredibly thorough. I think we just appreciate the support, and we appreciate what you both do for ska, for continuing to support ska music, and
thank you.
All the great content that you create, and the shows that you put on, and the whole series that you're doing at the Grammy Museum. It's all great. So thank you for all you do.
Yeah, and just want to add, at the Phensic on Instagram, and the Phensic, PHENSICK, SIC. What I was saying. All platforms, iTunes, Spotify, everywhere, stream it. Cool. And YouTube, we have our videos on there. But yeah, just again, you guys are brilliant, and it's rare that Marc and I get a chance to talk to people who are as passionate about the genre and the history too. We do think it's important, and I think again, any accomplished musician that's out there, from rock and roll to classical, has done their research and has researched the very beginning to the very current. So I just encourage everyone involved listening to this broadcast, if you haven't looked into the past of ska, seriously, just take a few minutes and look into it. It'll deepen your love for the music. So
great, perfect parting words.
Yeah, let's take ska to another level.
Yeah, absolutely. But we appreciate you guys.
We won't have the dinosaurs, not on our watch.
That's right.
No, man. No, it's we still have the love for it, and we still love doing it. So that's why we're here.
Absolutely. Well, and happy 35th anniversary to Bigger Thomas, and have a wonderful show.
You.
And a amazing debut show for the Phensic. And again, definitely appreciate you guys taking the time. And I always look forward to hanging when I'm on the East Coast. So I'll hit you back up again.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and Marc, again, congrats on all the success and accolades that you deserve so much for your book, Ska Boom. And with that, until next time, Junior, thank you.
Yes.
We want to thank everyone for the ongoing support. Please do subscribe to our podcast series and our YouTube channel. Follow at History of LA Ska on Instagram, and please join our Facebook group. Follow this gentleman at Junor Francis.
And I would be remiss not to mention that the series is produced by Rockery Radio at Rockery_radio by none other than the hardworking, devoted, and dedicated Eric Kohler.
Thank you, Junior. And on that note, until next time, be good. Much love and respect, guys. Junior. And please get out there and support live music. Until next time, take care. We'll see you.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Yep. Bye.